Hi, old bull here. There's a lie that's been sold to you. A quiet, seductive whisper that says being able is enough. That the world will bend because you've got muscles, degrees, or opinions. But here's the truth no one's saying out loud. Maybe you can, but will you? That's the real question. That's where the line gets drawn between a man who walks tall in the storm and a man who folds in the drizzle. We've got a culture obsessed with potential raw talent, big dreams, loud promises. But potential doesn't pull a bleeding child from a burning car. Potential doesn't hold the line when evil comes knocking. Potential is useless if it stays in your head and never reaches your hands. What matters is action. Grit. The decision to do the hard thing when it costs you, when no one claps, when everything inside you wants to run. That's manhood. That's legacy. And that's why you're here. This video isn't a pep talk. It's not for the soft-hearted or the half-committed. It's for men who are tired of being told they're enough just because they exist. It's for the ones who look in the mirror and ask, am I ready to bleed for what matters? You'll either walk away stronger or you'll walk away exposed. But either way, it's time to face the truth. You might be capable, but are you willing? I remember standing on those narrow steps, Arctic wind biting through the seams of my jacket, silence so thick you could almost taste it. That kind of cold makes your breath feel heavier, like even the air wants to weigh you down. And there I was, halfway up the stairs of a stranger's home in a village I barely knew, with nothing but a whisper of information and a whole lot of uncertainty behind that door. It wasn't the cold that made me pause, it was the quiet. That eerie, unnatural quiet that creeps into your bones and demands an answer from deep inside you. Will you act, or will you retreat? That moment taught me something most men never get a chance to learn. See, it's not about being brave in theory. It's not about reading books on courage or watching war films with swelling music and perfect endings. It's about what you do when your heart is hammering in your ears, and every step forward could be the last. There was no partner behind me, no backup on the way, no room for hesitation. It was just me, a worn vest, a zipped-up sidearm, and the question every real man has to face at some point. Will you knock on the door? Too many men today believe strength is measured in reps, speed, or titles. But muscles don't mean a thing if they freeze up when it matters. It's one thing to know how to fight. It's another to decide that you will, when you must, without applause, without warning, and possibly without walking away. That's the true weight of manhood. It's not bravado. It's not shouting your values online. It's standing firm in a moment no one will ever see, knowing full well you may not make it out. But you go anyway, because it's the right thing. You don't get ready for those moments the night before. You build yourself day by day, small choices stacking up like firewood. You learn how to control your breathing when the fear creeps in. You train not just your body, but your mind and your conscience. And if you're a man of faith, you pray not for safety, but for clarity, for the strength to do what needs to be done. Because it's not always obvious. Sometimes the danger's loud and in your face, but sometimes it's subtle, slow, like a frostbite you don't feel until it's too late. And in either case, hesitation is a luxury you can't afford, Dot. So if you think manhood is about being invincible, think again. It's about stepping up when it counts, knowing full well you're not invincible at all. It's about facing danger, not just with gear and training, but with resolve. That moment on the steps, it wasn't about the badge or the uniform. It was about whether I was the kind of man who would knock on the door when no one was watching. And that question, my friend, is one we all have to answer sooner or later, especially as we step into the next layer of what separates the strong from the merely capable. I've met plenty of men with muscles carved like stone, with resumes, full of accolades and trophies stacked on shelves. But I'll tell you what I've learned out here by the fire, through storms, solitude, and silence. None of that matters if the inside of a man is hollow. Strength isn't found in your shoulders or fists. It's found in the place where no one's watching, the quiet part of you that decides when to stand firm and when to walk away. That inner resolve, that spine of the soul, is what separates a strong man from a merely big one. See, the loudest man in the room isn't always the strongest. Sometimes he's the most frightened, because real strength doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need likes, followers, or applause. It shows up in stillness, in how you treat people when no one can see it, in how you handle temptation when there's no one to judge you but your conscience. A stoic man, a good man, holds the line not because he wants praise, but because he has a compass that doesn't change with the wind. I remember watching a cowboy once old, quiet, hands like leather. The kind of man who didn't say 10 words a day, but when he spoke, you listened. I asked him once what made a man strong, and he said, "Strength is when you can bury your anger, but never your principles." That stuck with me, because strength isn't rage, it's restraint. It's not about unleashing everything you've got. It's about knowing when to hold back, and still knowing you can act when the time comes. That's what I call quiet strength, and it's becoming rare. You don't build that kind of strength in the gym. You build it in the waiting, the enduring, the falling, and getting back up. Every time life knocks you down, and you choose to rise again instead of staying there. That's another stone in the foundation of real masculinity. Every time you choose to protect instead of destroy, serve instead of boast, endure instead of escape, you become a man worth following, worth trusting, worth remembering. So while the world keeps measuring men by loudness, status, or swagger, I'll keep watching for the ones who carry fire in their belly and silence in their footsteps. Because real strength doesn't yell. It stands, it holds, it endures, and it prepares you for whatever comes next, especially when there's no one around to cheer you on. And speaking of preparation, there's another kind of test most men will never pass, not because they couldn't, but because they never dared to try. There's a dangerous illusion spreading these days, a belief that skill alone makes a man capable, that if you've trained enough, studied enough, or lifted enough weight, you're ready for the fight. But I've seen skilled men freeze when it counted, and I've seen simple men without polish or pedigree, step up and do what needed to be done. Why? Because skill is what you can do. Courage is what you will do when it matters most. You can train all day with a rifle, learn every hold and throw in the book, memorize every rule in the courtroom or strategy in business. But when the pressure hits, when things go sideways, and the cost of action could be your name, your freedom, or your life, it's not skill that'll speak first. It's your core, the fight inside. And if that core is soft, all the training in the world won't carry you through the door when real danger knocks. I once knew a man, A real sharp shooter. Could hit a bottle cap at 300 yards. Bragged about it, too. But one day, when a mountain lion came up on our camp, eyes locked on a young ranch hand, the man just stood there. Froze, rifle in hand, heart in his throat. Meanwhile, another fella not half as good a shot picked up a shovel and ran toward the beast yelling. That cat turned and bolted, not because of firepower, but because that man had guts. Skill stood still. Courage moved, and that's the truth. Most won't say out loud being ready in theory doesn't mean you're ready in spirit. Courage is the bridge between what you know and what you're willing to risk. It's the deciding factor in whether a man steps into the fire or watches. It burns someone else. It doesn't mean you feel no fear. It means you've weighed the fear and chosen to act anyway, because something matters more than your safety. That's what being a real man demands. So while the world trains itself to be more efficient, more lethal, more calculated, I ask the one question most avoid. When it all goes dark, when it gets loud, when there's no one coming to save the day, will you move? That's where courage walks in and taps skill on the shoulder. And where we go from here depends entirely on that answer. Being a man isn't about bravado. It's not about the size of your truck, the noise of your boots, or how many notches you've carved on some imaginary belt. Real masculinity, quiet strength reveals itself when no one's watching, when the applause is gone and the crowd's disappeared. It's in those moments you choose what's right, not because it's easy, but because it's right. That's the essence of being a man. And brother, that kind of choice always comes at a cost. I've known men who could split a log with one swing and wrestle down a bull, but they'd buckle the second they had to stand alone for something they believed in. Because it's one thing to have muscle and another to have a spine. Doing what's right often means losing friends, respect, even comfort. But a strong man, a good man, doesn't measure his worth by how easy the road is. He measures it by whether he's still standing when it's over, knowing he didn't fold when it counted. One time, I had to fire a man I respected, not because I wanted to, but because he crossed a line. He was good at his job, charismatic, had folks on his side. But leadership isn't about popularity. It's about responsibility. I told him face to face, not through whispers or messages. Not because I wanted a fight, but because doing right by the team meant drawing a hard line. And I'll tell you, that was one of the loneliest evenings I've had in a long while. But I slept that night because I knew I did what a man had to do. In a world addicted to shortcuts and excuses, the stoic man, the one who walks into the fire because it's the only honorable path left, is becoming rare. And when I say honorable, I don't mean pristine or flawless. I mean faithful. Faithful to your values. Faithful to your wife. Faithful to the truth even when it hurts. That's the kind of man who leaves a legacy. Not the loud one. The consistent one. The man who holds the line, no matter how shaky the ground under his boots gets. So, if you're wondering whether you're living in your masculinity or just dressing it up, ask yourself this. Are you choosing what's right even when it costs you? When it's inconvenient? When it might make you look like the odd one out? That's where the truth lives. That's where the reflection in the mirror looks back and says, not with pride, but with peace, you did the right thing, even when no one clapped. Let me tell you something that most men today don't want to hear. Sometimes the cavalry ain't coming. There won't be a round of applause. There won't be a pat on the back. And there won't be anyone holding your hand telling you it's okay. It's just you, your boots, your breath, and the road ahead. And that's enough if you're willing to act anyway. Real manhood doesn't wait for permission or cheerleaders. It moves when it's time to move, especially when the world goes quiet. I've stood at the edge of decisions that made my hands shake. No advisor, no backup, just the sound of the wind and my own heartbeat. One time in Alaska, I faced a house where shots had been fired. It was 20 below, no radio, no partner. And yet, the choice to act or to retreat was mine alone. I walked those steps, not because I knew I'd win, but because I knew doing nothing was worse than failing. That's what it means to be a strong man. You act, even if it's just you against the dark. We've been raised in a culture that tells us we need affirmation before we take the first step. Social media likes, validation, groupthink. But the truth is, the world doesn't hand out medals for doing what's right. It tests you to see if you'll do it without the recognition. That's where strength of character is forged in the silence, in the absence of applause. When you hold the line because it's yours to hold, not because someone told you to. I've seen husbands stand alone to protect their families from toxic friends, from cultural nonsense, even from relatives who crossed the line. I've watched fathers choose integrity over convenience, walking out of jobs that asked them to lie, knowing it would cost them dearly. These are not popular men, but they are good men. Warriors, protectors, providers. They are the quiet foundation. Society stands on even if no one notices it. So the next time you're faced with a moment where everything in you screams, wait for someone else. I want you to pause, breathe, and remember this. The world doesn't need another man waiting to be told what to do. It needs men who stand, act, and carry the weight alone if they must. And if you've ever doubted whether that matters, I'll tell you this, it does. It always has. Because action without support is the seed of every legacy worth remembering. Don't follow the law because I fear the law. I follow the law when the law aligns with what I already know in my gut to be right. That's the difference. That's the mark of a real man. A good man. A strong man. You see, a man who only behaves because he's afraid of consequences isn't moral. He's managed. He's fenced in like cattle. But a man who does the right thing when no one's watching, when no one's asking, when there's nothing to gain and everything to lose, that's a man who walks with quiet strength and deep responsibility. There was a time, out in the bush, where I had to decide what kind of man I was. No badge, no backup, no eyes on me. And still, I didn't act out of fear of punishment. I acted because I knew who I was. That's where obedience lives. Not in legal codes, not in threats or fines, but in conscience. In the kind of man you see when you shave in the morning. And if you can't meet his gaze, if you've let go of your self-respect just to fit in, then you've lost more than freedom. You've lost identity. A lot of what passes for virtue today is nothing more than fear wearing a mask. Men obeying traffic laws, not because they care about safety, but because they're afraid of a ticket. Employees staying honest, not because they value integrity, but because they fear losing a paycheck. That's not strength of character. That's self-preservation. And self-preservation, while useful, is not the same as principle. It's the difference between the stoic man and the hollow man. One leads. The other hides behind rules. You want to know what a man's really made of? Take away the rules. Take away the spotlight. Give him freedom. Then watch. See what he does with it. If he uses it to help his neighbor, protect his family, serve something bigger than himself, he's a man worth following. But if he folds into selfishness, if he uses his freedom to take, cheat, or harm, he was never strong to begin with. That kind of man isn't dangerous in the way we need. He's just weak and armed out, so don't aim to be a law-abiding man. Aim to be a righteous one. Not righteous in the fake, smug way. I'm talking about a man who knows the weight of his choices, who feels the silence after the wrong decision and lets it shape him. A man whose compass doesn't change with the headlines. That's the kind of obedience this world's starving for, and the kind of man I'd trust with a campfire, a secret, or a daughter. You don't get to call yourself a protector just because you wear a wedding ring or have a family photo on your desk. That title has to be earned. And it's earned in the quiet moments when no one's looking, when the weight gets heavy and you choose to carry it anyway. Being a man, a real man, means stepping between your people and whatever threatens them. Not just physically, but emotionally, financially, spiritually. You hold the line. You don't pass the burden. You carry it. That's the role. That's the cost. I've known men who trained their whole lives to fight, but couldn't lift a finger when their family needed direction. And I've known others who never threw a punch in their life, but would have walked through fire to shield their wife or child. Protection doesn't always look like a fist. Sometimes it looks like a quiet man canceling his dream to make sure dinner's on the table. Sometimes it looks like staying up late to listen, or waking early to pray over the people in your care. That's what quiet strength looks like. That's what a good man does. There's a fire inside every man worth his boots. A fire that doesn't burn for glory, or recognition, or applause. It burns for those he loves, for the ones he's vowed to protect. And when that fire goes out, when a man becomes more interested in his comfort than their safety, he's lost his edge. He's no longer a warrior. He's just an occupant, a placeholder. This world doesn't need placeholders. It needs men ready to stand firm, even when it costs them everything. You've got to ask yourself, what price are you willing to pay? Because the moment of decision won't give you time to weigh the options. It'll come fast, out of nowhere, and if you haven't already made the choice deep down, you'll freeze. You'll falter, and the ones you love might pay the price you were too afraid to. So don't wait for the emergency. Decide now. Decide what kind of man you'll be when the alarm sounds, when the shadows stretch long, when the storm finally hits dot. To protect your people is not just an action, it's an identity. You walk into every room with the eyes of a guardian. You watch the exits, you scan the mood, you carry the weight so they don't have to. And that doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you responsible. It makes you dependable. It makes you the kind of man they sleep easy around, the kind of man they call when everything falls apart. That kind of strength doesn't come from the gym. It comes from love. A love so fierce you'd burn everything down before letting harm reach your campfire. I've seen big men with arms like tree trunks and necks, thicker than fence posts fold like paper when life punched back. And I've seen skinny, wiry, old souls stand their ground against storms that would flatten a lesser man. What made the difference wasn't size. It wasn't muscle. It was resolve, determination, that quiet decision deep in the gut that says, I don't care how big the mountain is. I'm not turning back. That's where real danger is born. In a man's will, not in his frame. We live in a world obsessed with optics. Social media is full of shirtless poses and flexed egos. But a strong man isn't the one with the loudest presence. He's the one with the quietest certainty. He doesn't bark. He doesn't boast. He just knows. He knows what matters. He knows what he'll stand for. He knows what he'll never allow. That kind of man walks into a room and doesn't have to say a word. You feel him. Not because he's loud, but because he's ready. And readiness is power. There's a kind of danger you can't train in a gym. It's the danger that comes from conviction, from values carved into your bones by hardship, discipline, faith. A man like that isn't moved by trends or tantrums. You can't intimidate him with chaos. He's already seen worse and walked through it. And the fire that shaped him, it didn't just leave scars, it forged purpose. That's the kind of fire that makes a man dangerous, not to the innocent, but to the wicked, to the wolves who prey on the weak. If you want to know how dangerous a man really is, don't ask him how much he can bench. Ask him what he's willing to lose for what he believes. Ask him what lines he'll never cross. What lines he'll never let anyone else cross near the people he loves. Ask him if he's already decided what he'd die for, and more importantly, what he's willing to live for, suffer for, carry weight for day after day. That's the kind of danger this world needs more of. Not muscle, resolve not, so don't waste your time building a body without building the soul that drives it. Don't sculpt your image and neglect your character. Because when the time comes, when things get ugly and someone needs to step forward, it won't be your abes or your jawline that stand firm. It'll be your inner fire, your determination, your discipline, your responsibility. And the man who carries those quietly is the one you'd better never mistake for soft. That's the man who's truly dangerous. You don't prepare for evil. On the day it knocks, you prepare long before, in the quiet, in the early mornings when no one's watching, in the decisions you make when no one's clapping. The truth is, the world ain't just broken, it's got teeth. And those teeth bite into the soft and the unready. Evil doesn't announce itself with a trumpet. It shows up in shadows. It creeps in through comfort. And if you're not hardened in the right ways, if your emotions are brittle and your body untested, you're going to get chewed up and spat out before you know what hit you. A real man sharpens two swords, his heart and his hands. You've got to be strong enough inside to carry weight that ain't yours. That means learning to feel everything and still act. You'll face fear, doubt, regret, and you'll carry scars. But if your spirit is disciplined, if your emotions have been tempered by truth and not pampered by convenience, you won't break when hell shows up. You'll stand, you'll protect, you'll endure. That's emotional strength, quiet strength. The kind you build through solitude, reflection, and responsibility. Now don't ignore the physical part either. Evil doesn't always come as an idea comes as a man, a threat, a pair of hands wrapped around someone you love. You don't need to be a cage fighter, but you do need to be capable. Learn how to defend. Learn how to handle a rifle. Learn what it feels like to sweat, to suffer under weight, to breathe hard and still push through. Get your boots dirty, because there's no nobility in being helpless when someone needs you to be strong. Strength is service. I've met too many men who've read every book, watched every sermon, memorized every proverb, but can't change a tire, can't lift a wounded friend, can't stand between their family and a threat. That's not wisdom. That's neglect. Preparation means being ready in mind and in muscle. It's eating right, not just for abs, but for energy. It's training your hands, not for pride, but for provision. It's keeping your body and mind sharp, not for your image, but for your purpose. So ask yourself, if evil showed up on your doorstep today, would you hesitate? Would you freeze? Would you crumble? Or would you be ready? Ready to lead, ready to protect, ready to absorb the hit so others don't have to. That kind of readiness ain't about fear, it's about love. A strong man prepares not because he wants a fight, but because he refuses to let evil win. Now tell me, are you preparing for what's out there, or just pretending it ain't coming? Sacrifice. That's a word most folks avoid these days, like a rattlesnake under the porch. But if you're a man worth your boots, you know deep down that real manhood doesn't bloom in comfort. It's forged in the heat of surrender, the giving up of your time, your pride, your wants, even your life, when the moment calls for it. And not for applause, not for legacy, but because something or someone is worth more than your convenience. That's the heartbeat of being a protector, a provider, a strong man. You see, sacrifice ain't about loss. It's about choice. It's saying, I could keep this for me, but I won't. A real man doesn't look at the scales and weigh what he gets in return. He just sees what needs to be done and does it. He misses sleep, so his kid has what? He never did. He bites his tongue to keep peace in his home. He drives the beat-up truck so his wife can drive the safer one. And nobody ever gives him a trophy for it. But you can bet his quiet strength keeps that house standing through storms others don't see. Now, let me get personal here. I've known men who worked 2 jobs, wore boots with holes, ate less at dinner, and smiled through it all, just so the people they loved wouldn't have to feel that weight. That's not weakness. That's warrior blood. That's the kind of strength the world's forgotten to respect. And truth is, we don't talk enough about what it costs to carry that load day after day, year after year, with no crowd cheering, no parade, no thank you, just the knowledge that you held the line. The real question ain't whether you can do great things. It's whether you'll give up good things to make the great ones happen. Will you give up a dream job to be a present father? Will you trade your ego for peace in your marriage? Will you risk your own comfort, your own safety, your own plans for what matters most? And if you won't, then maybe it's time to rethink. What you say matters most, because talk is cheap. But sacrifice, that's costly. And that's what separates the real men from the boys still chasing applause. So here's the deal, cowboy. Someday you'll be asked to lay something down: your pride, your plans, maybe even your life. And when that moment comes, there won't be time to prepare. You'll have to already be the kind of man who's decided that honor matters more than comfort. That love is heavier than ambition. That what you protect is more important than what you build. And that's where the next lesson begins, because when the sacrifice is made, the fire doesn't go out. It passes on. I'd die for you. Sounds noble, doesn't it? Poetic even. The kind of line that makes its way into love songs and dramatic speeches. But let me tell you something. Partner dying for someone ain't the hard part. dying is quick. One moment, you're here. Next moment, you're gone. Saying you'd die for someone is easy when there's no real risk of it. It don't cost much breath to make a promise you likely won't ever be asked to keep. The real question, the one that matters, is this: will you live for them? Living for someone, now that's where the grit is. That's where the daily fight begins. Waking up before dawn to pull your weight. Choosing patience when frustration comes knocking. Keeping your word when you'd rather run. That takes endurance. That takes discipline. That's manhood in its rawest form. And any man who brags about dying for his woman, but won't wash a dish or hold the line for his family in silence, he's just playing. Dress up in the armor of a warrior he never became. You know, I've sat around enough campfires and listened to men talk. Some of the loudest ones speak of valor like it's a badge they already earned. But when it's time to actually sacrifice comfort, pride, ego, they vanish like smoking. The wind. You want to impress someone? Don't tell her you'd die for her. Show her you'll wake up every day and fight for her peace, her dignity, her dreams, even if that means taking the harder path yourself. That's what makes a man dependable. That's what makes a man respected. Because love ain't about grand gestures. Love is 1,000 quiet decisions. It's a man who comes home tired, but still asks how her day went. It's picking up the slack when she's too worn out to carry her part. It's holding back your own storm so hers can pass in peace. These are the sacrifices that matter, and they don't come with medals. They don't get written into songs, but they build a legacy no tombstone ever could. So next time you feel the urge to say, "I'd die for you," pause. Think. Ask yourself, have I lived for her today? Have I loved her with patience, with presence, with integrity? Because promises are wind, what you do every day. That's what counts. And it's in that quiet, committed living where real manhood is born, and where the next challenge rises just around the bend. You know, there was a time when men carried their pain the way a horseman carries his saddle tight, steady, and close to the body. Not because they were numb, but because they understood that life comes with weight. Today, though, I look around and I see something different. I see a generation raised to believe that every bruise needs a spotlight and every discomfort needs a diagnosis. We've traded quiet strength for emotional theatrics, and somehow we've called it growth. But I'll tell you, real strength ain't loud. It's not dramatic. It's measured. It's forged in silence. Emotional weakness today has become a virtue in the eyes of some. We've confused vulnerability with surrender, honesty with dependency. And while I believe there's power in knowing your wounds, I also believe in tending them without bleeding on everyone around you. A real man doesn't deny his pain, he just doesn't let it run his life. He knows when to speak and when to hold, when to share and when to carry it quietly so the people he loves don't have. T.O., that's not toxic. That's responsibility. That's manhood. I see boys in grown men's bodies falling apart when a plan fails or when life demands more than comfort. They panic under pressure. They collapse at the first rejection. They seek applause for surviving what past generations endured in silence while still pushing forward. We've raised men to believe that resilience is cruelty and that boundaries are violence. And now we wonder why so few are dependable. Why so few are dangerous in the right way. Listen to me. Friend, the world is not gentle. It doesn't care about your feelings, and it never will. You don't prepare a man for life by teaching him to crumble when things get hard. You prepare him by helping him build that quiet inner fire, that strength of character that holds when everything else is falling apart. A man who cries at every cut isn't stronger than one who doesn't. He's just more visible. And in a world that thrives on noise, quiet resolve is often mistaken for absence. But that's where the strongest men live, in the stillness. This epidemic of emotional frailty, it's not just bad for men. It's dangerous for families, for children, for the entire foundation of community. Because when men no longer know how to stand, others fall too. And that's the kind of weight you don't recover from easily. So you better learn to stand, to breathe, to endure, and to find that place inside you that doesn't need permission to be strong. Courage isn't about barking the loudest in a room or walking around with your chest puffed like a rooster in a storm. No, real courage is a quiet thing. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. And it sure as hell doesn't need an audience. I've seen too many men try to look brave putting on the boots, the beard, the bravado, without ever doing the hard work of being brave. Looking the part is easy. Living it when no one's watching? That's where the fire is forged. See, the problem today is we've made courage a costume. Folks think if they talk tough, post quotes, and wear a certain jacket, it somehow makes them dangerous, noble, or strong. But let me tell you, true courage has nothing to prove. A real man doesn't need to announce his presence. The weight he carries speaks for itself. His courage lives in the way he handles pain, how he protects the people he loves, how he speaks truth when it's costly, and how he stands tall when the easy option is to kneel. I remember a time I had to confront a man I respected. He'd crossed a line. Now, I didn't want that fight. I wasn't looking to embarrass him or destroy our friendship. But right is right, and I knew if I stayed silent, I'd betray myself. That's what courage looks like in real life. It's not kicking down doors. Sometimes it's sitting across from someone you care about and telling them the hard thing because it's the right thing. That takes more strength than any bench press ever could. The truth is, courage without character is just noise. And we've got plenty of noise out there, men, shouting about freedom, loyalty, and honor while failing every test those words actually demand. Real courage doesn't shrink under pressure. It doesn't flinch when truth costs something. It shows up at 3 a.m. when the baby's crying, when the wife is scared, when the friend is breaking. It shows up even when it's tired, even when no one will say thank you. Real courage never waits for a stage. So if you're going to be brave where it counts. Be the kind of man who can walk through fire without needing to broadcast it. Cultivate courage like you cultivate a crop, steadily, season by season, through storms and sun. And understand this, courage isn't about fearlessness. It's about being scared as hell and doing the thing anyway. That's the kind of courage this world needs more of. And that leads us to something even more dangerous than fake bravery. Selective morality disguised as faith. I've met men who can quote half the Bible, who know chapter and verse like the back of their weathered hand. But when it comes to living that truth, walking it out when no one's looking, they come up empty. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? In a world hungry for meaning, we've got too many folks dressing up morality like it's a Sunday coat, something they wear when it's convenient, and hang back up the moment it costs them comfort, reputation, or control. Real faith doesn't live in slogans or bumper stickers. It ain't found in perfect attendance or hollow rituals. It lives in the broken moments when you could lie and don't, when you're tempted and walk away, when forgiving someone hurts more than holding a grudge. That's where you find true religion, not in the loudest prayer, but in the quietest act of mercy. And if you're only holy around certain people, you're not holy, you're just good at hiding your dirt. I've seen men post verses about strength and leadership, then turn around and belittle their wives, neglect their kids, or cheat their neighbors. That ain't strength, and it sure ain't manhood. It's moral cosplay. We've got a generation more worried about looking righteous than being righteous. They preach discipline, but can't control their temper. They quote proverbs, but won't pick up a broom. They wear crosses, but don't carry them, and don't think the world doesn't notice. Here's the thing: God doesn't need more performers. He needs real men, strong men with quiet strength, stoic men who don't bend truth to fit their feelings. You can't cherry-pick morality and still call yourself a good man. It's all or nothing. You don't get to live like hell Monday through Saturday and expect Sunday morning to cover the bill. Integrity isn't a spotlight, it's a shadow. It follows you when no one else does. If you want to call yourself a Christian, a protector, a man of principle, then act like it when it's hard, when it's thankless, when no one's clapping. That's the gospel the world needs to see. Not perfection, but consistency. Not arrogance, but humility. Because when you stop playing holy and then start living honestly, well, then you're ready to face the real question that's been staring you down all along. The one that demands a soul-deep answer. Not if you can, but if you will not sit down with your own silence, sometime just you. A chair, maybe the crackle of firewood or the whistle of wind through a tree line, and ask yourself one thing: what am I responsible for? Not what you feel like doing, not what you want to be responsible for, but what life, by its very weight and calling, has placed in your hands. Because being a man, a real man, isn't about chasing comfort or stacking victories. It's about answering duty, even when no one's clapping, and especially when everything in you wants to run. Responsibility is that quiet weight we carry, sometimes with pride, sometimes with pain. It's the tired look in the eyes of a father who hasn't slept, but still gets up before dawn to provide. It's the mother who goes without, so her kids won't. It's the older man who could quit, who has every excuse to disappear, but he doesn't. He stays. He teaches. He keeps the line held. That's duty. And no Instagram quote or podcast rant is going to substitute for that kind of lived-out commitment. You want to know the difference between a boy and a man? A boy asks, "What do I get out of this?" A man asks, "What must I do?" That's it. That's the fork in the road. One leads to chaos, the other to legacy. And let me tell you something else. If you don't define what your duty is, the world will. And you won't like the terms. They'll pull you in 1,000 directions, promise you freedom, and leave you burnt out, stuck, and empty. But when you claim your duty, when you name it and bear it, you don't just survive. You rise. But here's the thing about responsibility. It doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It shows up in storms. It knocks when you're tired. It calls when you've got nothing left in the tank. That's when the quiet strength inside you either speaks up or stays silent. That's where character is forged, not in the spotlight, not with applause, but in the heat of doing what needs to be done over and over, because it's right, even if no one ever says thank you. So I'll leave you with this. What's your duty? What's your fight? Not the one that looks good, the one that's real, the one that will ask everything of you and give you something better in return meaning. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, about being dependable, about showing up every damn day when others won't. You want purpose? You want peace? It starts there, in the mirror, with your boots on, your heart steady, and your answer to the question, will I? You've heard it all before. Be strong, be ready, be a man. But now I'm asking you to go deeper, to stop treating manhood like a performance, and start living it as a daily choice. Will you act when no one's watching? Will you protect what you love, even when the cost is everything? That's the kind of question that separates boys playing hero from men who carry real scars. So here's what I want you to ask yourself before this video ends. Are you the man who talks about what he would do, or the man who already knows what he will do because he's done it? Because truth is, this world doesn't need louder men. It needs steadier ones. The kind who think in silence, move with purpose, and only speak when there's something worth saying. So if this message stirred something in you, a challenge, a memory, a calling, then don't just walk away. Do something. Drop a comment below. Share a moment where you stood your ground or where you wish you had. Let's build this brotherhood, one honest story at a time. And if you want more hard truths and real talk that you won't hear anywhere else, subscribe to Old Bull's Wisdom and turn on the notifications. We're not here to entertain. We're here to prepare men to endure, protect, and rise again. Now be logical. Be dangerous. Be ready.